Hello there, this is Warpath 1985 speaking. Today's day 7 of the 12 Days of War. I should be discussing the Transformers War for Cybertron Earthrise Hoist. Now, Hoist is a very interesting character overall. As per usual, I shall mainly be discussing the G1 and G1 Edition versions of Hoist. And obviously, we talk firstly the Generation 1 version of Hoist, who primarily appeared in obviously the G1 cartoon. He also did appear in the Marvel comic book, by extension most other supplementary media. So he also did appear in other media beyond G1 as well. However, that's really important because I was just mainly talking about G1 in general. He did also appear in Dreamwave, I believe, in the background mainly. He did, however, have some minor roles here and there, if caught correctly, but once again, Dreamwave was pretty much gone by the time they got to most of the 85 and 86 characters, which is unfortunate, to say the least. When it comes to IW Hoist, he did appear a lot, although yes, most roles were much minor. At least he did appear a lot in the comic book, primarily in both More Resized / Lost Light, technically, even though he didn't appear in Lost Light correctly. However, he did appear in the More Resized comic book series, and I think he is still alive, or always was still alive by the time of the entire Unicron arc, by the end of the IW 2005 continuity. However, the 2019 continuity, I'm not really sure, because once again, the consistency of that series was pretty weird when it comes to most of the characters that were appeared mainly in the comic book continuity of 2019 IDW. However, he did not appear in other media like Anachan Universe, as he is still, like most of the 85 cast, partially absent. Although yes, we would assume that he's probably still out there, because other 85 characters like Jetfire, Warpath, I would assume that they're still there, but so far we haven't seen them yet, so we shall see soon enough, I guess. But for Earthrise Hoist, the figure itself is very good overall, even though yes, it's technically supposed to be a weird amalgamation of both Hoist and also Trailmaker, but primarily it's supposed to be Hoist. This is seen with, obviously, with Trailmaker, which I do own, and also by extension Breaker, and also by extension Lift Ticket, for which I shall show off soon enough. But for now, I shall mainly be showing off the figure itself. When it comes to accessories, he only ever came with one. That'll be his blaster / missile launcher here, which is very similar to all his other wrist mounted weapons. It is entirely molded in orange plastic. It is unpainted, unlike future figures that are using this mold. However, there are some details here and there to further enhance it. Hoist was also the few figures after Siege to have battle damage as well. But for Hoist, it makes sense in the sense that he is technically both a technician and an engineer. So obviously you would assume that about of his general occupation, he would have a lot of wear and tear on him, which is primarily here on the front of the hood in the Toyota Hilux tow truck mode, which makes sense because obviously, well, when he's welding, you'd assume that the sparks will probably just chip off some of the paint there. But for articulation overall, he's pretty good, although yes, he does have loose knees. That's maybe due to age overall. Like, for example, future Earthrise figures where the tolerances were to be completely impacted by outside sources, but also has some kind of cheapening out a little bit. But generally, Earthrise Hoist has pretty good articulation overall. He has a ball joint at the head, hinged shoulders, but they are on this swivel that's attached to the large chunk of the posterior bed, fender, and partial of the door, turning the whole door of the Toyota Hilux tow truck mode. But yeah, it has a lot of range there. It has a very nice elbow bend to the transformation, so 9 degrees as well. Bicep cut, a swivel at the wrist, very nice kick both forward and back, excellent spread, and a very deep knee bend. Once again, also due to transformation, and ankle articulation is also here. And if you're curious, the rocket launcher / wrist blaster welding device, etc., does not technically hinder the articulation of the wrist. That does look pretty weird overall when you do rotate it. Now for comparison, I'm going to be showing hoists with other figures. Firstly, that are used as mold. For example, Lift Ticket, but also Breaker, and Trailbreaker. And obviously you can see that although yes, Trailbreaker also wears the mold / body pretty well as well, however it doesn't really fit his more football player physique that he's mainly shown to have in most media. Although it does technically look much closer to that IDW appearance, where he's a lot more rotund, but still it does look pretty funky overall, even though yes, he does still have his various tools and exclusive rocket launcher / blaster that's mounted to his hand / arm. But yeah, they look pretty good together. And for his best friend, I also have Grapple here. And once again, they look excellent together. I would show off the Constructicons, but I do have them transferred into the combined mode of Devastator because, well, I'm doing photography, so bummer, I guess. For transformation of Earthrise Hoist, it's probably not necessarily the easiest, but most certainly one where easier conversions in comparison to most other Earthrise figures, because overall Earthrise had the most inconsistent complexity when it comes to most of the figures, when it comes to all their engineering quirks, etc., as most of them do work well together overall when it comes to transformation, etc. You do get this general feeling that certain figures were definitely prioritized over others, or how certain figures' conversions were significantly more refined in comparison to others, especially in certain cases where, due to budgeting, those figures were pretty much goners in a sense. Doesn't even be considered a good figure. Take for example Earthrise Double who infamously had a horrific conversion and also had even worse legs, both in articulation and also just visually looked really bad. So most certainly, like, certain figures did have better conversions or even had worse conversions, but when it comes to Hoist, his conversions are very smooth, very easy to understand, and everything has good clearance and etc. Although yes, you do run into certain problems here and there, mainly involving that being the conversion both out of and into the Toyota Hilux mode. At least in general, it is still a lot easier in comparison to figures like, once again, Earthrise Double Dealer. And there is Earthrise Hoist in his Toyota Hilux mode. For weapon storage, you can either store his blaster here on this side, which I prefer a little more. He also has a tow hitch, technically, which unlike traditional tow hitches, it just functions as to latch on underneath a car rather than just hooking them on there on the front bumper or somewhere underneath the front half of the vehicle. It does have the airlock system gimmick, which can function with either one of the airlock Battlemasters, such as sound barrier. So literally he's towing a sound barrier around, or one of the various Micromaster Citybots. And finally, here is Hoist with the other Toyota Hilux bots. And they look pretty good all together, I must say. A final note before I end this video is that Hoist, oddly enough, did get a reissue very recently. However, obviously his Earthrise Sphere is still readily available on aftermarket as well. I believe for decent prices, mainly just because not many people were interested in getting Hoist or even keeping on to him. So obviously most of these figures are still available, especially Hoist in this case is easier one to find. However, overall, you just want to get a single figure this mold. I personally recommend getting Lift Ticket overall, since he's still pretty much the cheapest option of all four, with Trailbreaker being the most expensive. Even though yes, he did get reissue, that reissue is still $30, so yeah, not the cheapest. But yeah, that's all for the 7th day of 12 Days of War. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hopefully I shall see you next time for day 8. Bye.